Hello guys, Vengeancer here. I'm doing some more cooking today. What was it that I was cooking? Stir-fried veggies, that's what it was. And yes, I'm using Manos Cooks Clothes because I want the mastery. I want to cook the most. I'm not worried about how quickly I'm cooking. I'm worried about getting the max number of dishes. And it doesn't take that much longer anyway because 50% chance of mass cooking gets activated. So there's that. But I got a little bit of a thing I've been thinking about while I'm doing this. I'm cooking stir-fried veggies because I need them for Balanos meals. I have like 500,000 beers, so that's enough. I've got 250,000 smoked fish steak, so I'm going for 250,000 Balanos meal cooks, and so I'm working on cooking up 500,000 stir-fried vegetables, which I'm not going to get anywhere near it. I spent most of the day yesterday drying milk into cheese so I can make these last two ingredients after I get done with the stir-fried vegetables, so there's that. And my cooking is slow going up because we got a bunch of Life XP stuff going on currently, and plus we got all the premium subscription things going from the login rewards. So there's that, and I think a lot of people are quitting. Like I said before, I'm ranked in a lot of things that I wouldn't normally be ranked in, which is very strange. So that means numbers are down or people just aren't logging in. But anyway, while my character sits here and cooks, I have a little bit of a thing I've been thinking about. And I kind of wrote up a little thing that I want to talk about. So, you probably already know from the video title, this is about combat balance in MMORPGs. So just, you don't have to worry about what's on the screen because I'm not moving. I'm going to be cooking, but you can just listen. I like doing these podcasty style shows and giving it just some my attempt at getting my opinion on how things should be out there. So I'm going to go over a few things. I've got it written up, and I'll post it at the end. I'll switch over to that screen, and you can kind of see it. But first off, I want to go over the ideal MMORPG combat balance and just how it should be broken down and what I believe is to be a perfect round-robin rock, paper, scissors style balance, which is kind of, the idea of class balance and combat balance. So you basically have three types of combat: melee, range, and caster. As a characteristic for each one, you've got your melee should be fast as far as movement goes, and it should have a medium amount of mobile skills. So it should have a very fast running speed, but the mobile skills like dashes and gap closers, it should have a moderate amount of those. It shouldn't have too many, it should just be moderate. The ranged is basically the counter to melee. They should be slower, but they should have high mobile skills. So it should be able to be a very mobile class, but it should not have a very fast running speed. That way melee still has a chance to fight them, and it's not just one-sided. Yes, range is going to have an advantage, but if it's balanced correctly, it shouldn't feel too unfair. Now caster's a little bit different. They should also be slow. I'm talking about like your wizards, mages, that kind of thing. Other caster classes that use magic, or maybe physical caster as well, but they're just caster classes. They're not really an auto attack class. They should have a slow running speed, but they should also only have medium mobile skills. So they're basically the ranged counterpart to melee. That way, if somebody plays correctly, they can kite, but if they mess up, they get smoked. But that's the way I see it, how it should be in terms of just the 3 types of combat. Now, after you get that balanced correctly, with the melees having access to the skills, the mobile skills, and each class having access to the mobile skills that it should have and having the right amount of movement speed, then you have to balance it around your combat skills, and these are the damaging skills, and I believe there should be 4 types of damaging skills. Right? You should have single target, you should have area of effect, you should have damage over time, and you should have crowd control. Those are the 4 offensive skills. Now, there are other skills, which would be defensive and self-buffs and that kind of stuff, and I'll talk about those later. But for now, the 4 I listed are the important offensive combat skills. So single target, the way these should be balanced are as follows. So for single target, it should have high damage, but it should only target 1 target, and it should have a longer cooldown. It's kind of like a burst skill, and you're going to see a lot of probably melee classes and rangers have those. And maybe even casters would have some of those, but they're going to be few and far between. So you're going to want to balance around that. Now, the area of effect skills, which is the next one, it should have medium damage. You don't want an area of effect skill that's going to one-shot everything. The idea is to use a bunch of these area of effect skills to mass farm mob grind. So you want medium damage, you want it to hit multiple targets and have kind of a medium cooldown. So you can have several of them and you rotate between. So it ends up being where you gather up a bunch of mobs, you use your AoE skills, and then your single target wants to finish off other things. And if this works the same way in PvP, you want the damage on the AoEs being lower so that casters don't become, or just classes with AoEs in general don't become overpowered. Now the last 2 are something that are kind of glossed over and overlooked in most senses and in a lot of games, but damage over time skills, and I'm a big fan of these. They should have low damage. They should have residual damage over a time effects that stack, so like burns, bleeds, poisons, that kind of thing. And they should have low cooldown. So you should be able to spam these, stack up a bunch of stacks. Of course, there should be a stack limit, and but they should have low initial damage, so you're not hitting for much, but you're stacking on, say, poisons. And over time, it stacks up and does damage. Pretty self-explanatory there. Now, the last one is crowd control. They should have low damage on crowd control skills. There's no reason that you should get practically one shot and stunned by the same skill. That's ridiculous. So your crowd control skills should have low or no damage. They should have medium cooldowns so that you're not overpowered and completely stun locking somebody. Which you can balance stun locks with stun mitigation and basically like cleanses. You can give self buffs that cleanse, that kind of thing on the other side of that. But the crowd control should be 2 different types of crowd control, and you can balance these however you want between classes. I'm not going to go into like the full like breakdown of skills, but there's hard and soft crowd control. Hard crowd control is stuns, freezes, disarms, and soft crowd control would be slows and blinds and roots. So like a blind, you can still hit things, but you just can't see what you're shooting at or aiming your skills at. And roots means you can't move, but you can still cast things or still use skills if a target is close enough to you. So that's considered. And then of course slows are annoying, but it just hinders you, it doesn't disable you. So that is considered soft CC. The hard CCs are like stuns where you can't move, can't do anything, freezes where you can't move or do anything, and then disarms where you can't attack or like disable. So those are the hard CCs. So that's kind of my little rant about how skills and types of combat are supposed to be. Now I want to kind of delve into how the combat is supposed to be balanced, and it's basically like rock paper scissors. It's supposed to be a circle where each character / class that you have in the game fits into one of the 3 above, either melee, range, or caster, And of course, there can be kind of a combination. And each one's going to have some of the 4 offensive skills that are listed out. But the general consensus is that melee characters are strong against casters because they are faster and more mobile, or at least as mobile as a caster, but they also run faster, so eventually a caster is going to be caught. The caster is going to kill the range because of burst and AoE damage. Range is going to be killing the melees, right? So that's kind of how the rock, paper, scissors go. Melee beats caster, caster beats range, range beats melee. Of course, casters can kite the melees if it is balanced correctly. Then it basically becomes a game of chess, where you are weighing cooldowns versus CC, and that allows a caster to kite if they have CC that they can CC a melee with, or that allows a range to kite or kill casters if they have cooldowns that can CC and stuff, and then vice versa, casters can fight the ranges. So that's how it's supposed to be balanced. But if they are balanced well in that respect, then you have to look at tanks, tankiness versus just damage dealers. And of course, there's always the Holy Trinity in the traditional MMORPGs, where you have tanks, healers, and damage dealers. Healers, I always look at as a balance afterwards. A side note, which I have another thought about healers later on, I will touch on. But in terms of builds, there's supposed to be a rock, paper, scissors balance as well. So it's all supposed to be built around tanks. The tanks are supposed to counter the one-shot mechanics, or the big damage dealers, which are casters and rangers. The damage over time builds are supposed to counter a tank, because if you stack them on, it's going to bleed a bunch of health down, and it kind of mitigates the defense and tankiness. And then the one-shot or huge damage dealers, the bursty damage dealers, they're supposed to counter the damage over time builds, so that is kind of a rock, paper, scissors balance there. Now, crowd control is supposed to be spread out among all 3 different compositions, so that it helps with kiting and lockdown, and it balances PvP around cooldowns instead of just one class being overpowered. So say you have a melee, they are very fast, they have a lot of high mobility skills, and so they have a medium amount of high mobility skills, and they can dash onto and lock down a caster. Well, a caster is supposed to have like its own teleports and cleanses and stuff to get out of CC, but if those cooldowns have been used and those skills are on cooldown, then they're going to get locked down and killed, and that's how it's supposed to be balanced, right? Same with rangers, and the whole kiting thing with melee versus ranged. It's always a touchy subject, but that's how I think it should be balanced. Just another to add to that thought, melee characters, they need more mobile and crowd control skills so that they can lock down the range and the caster. Caster and range need to be able to CC, which stands for crowd control, to help kite against the melee and protect against other casters and range users. And then if it's balanced correctly, it becomes a fair fight that can go either way depending on major crowd control, skill use in kiting, and basically it becomes cooldown management at that point. So it is more of a game of chess balanced around rock, paper, scissors. And then of course you have meta builds that just become a thing out of that. But there was a game that did that fairly well. It's why I played it. It was a WoW clone. It was called Forsaken World. They shut it down a while back, and I've mentioned it before, but I always used to play Arena in there, and I did play a mage, and it was very well balanced. Even though it was pay to win, and if you ran into somebody that had spent a lot, of course their gear was a lot more than your gear if you didn't spend a lot. So yeah, you get one shot and stuff like that. But in terms of fighting someone that was on your gear level, it was very well balanced. I could CC the heck out of somebody, and I took a medium to high amount of damage. So if I got hit, I could get one shot, or I could, it depended on what cooldowns I had up. If I got CC'd and I didn't have my cleanse up, then I was pretty much done. And if I managed to hit all of my crowd control and just keep them locked down, then I could essentially kite away from them and keep them permanently locked down until I could kill them. And if they had their cleanse up, then then they could get on me. Same with warriors, they could dash. It was very well balanced, and I liked that gameplay. But it was based around Holy Trinity, so healers, if you had a decent healer, they could keep you alive, which I want to talk about. Once you get the balance done initially, there's going to be classes with characters with class concepts that are just by nature weaker than others. Healers, bards, that kind of thing. I know Black Desert doesn't have bards, but they kind of have a support class here and there. I know my wizard has heals and buffs that help the party. But you want to add in self buffs and defensive skills and heals to basically give classes that are a disadvantage a little bit more of an advantage. So you might give every class one self heal just to help it in PvE, especially if it's a BDO solo game. You want a way to heal in case you don't have a party. But you also would want to add in the fact that maybe you give shields to the casters, like a mana pool. And that's another thing that I want to talk about. I want to talk about healers and wizards or mages in specific here in a minute. But you basically make the character's kit to where each unique class trait becomes its strength, and it doesn't mess with the initial balance, right? So for BDO, we don't really have healers. I mean, yes, there's classes that can AoE heal and buff and stuff, but we don't have a traditional Trinity where you have a tank that's tanking stuff and a healer just spamming heals and not damage dealing. So I've always been a believer that priests, healers, paladins, whatever you want to call them, that they should have universal skills. So take a game like World of Warcraft that has a full-on Trinity-based system where you have tanks and damage dealers, and then the third wheel, or the third leg, is the priests and the healers that keep everybody alive. And you usually, for most of the time, the healers and stuff, they're at a disadvantage because half of their kit is heals, and it's based on party play. Well, I've always been a big believer, and I haven't played a game like this, and maybe there's one out there that I just don't know about, but I think that healers and priests in general should have universal skills. And what I mean by that is they have less skills than they normally would. So you have combat skills and heal skills. Scrap all of that. You center the priest skills around the priest theme. You got lots of skills like maybe holy light or different things, and depending on if you are casting it on an enemy or a hostile monster or a hostile player versus if you are casting it on an ally, it should have different effects. That way you are balancing the priest around cooldowns, and you're not balancing it around damage dealing versus healing. I mean, you still kind of are. So say you're in a party, you have a priest, and she has like she or he, whatever, has 3 different skills as a main rotation. If they use those skills on the monster, it's going to deal certain amounts of damage and have debuff effects or whatever. But if you use them on your allied party members, they get certain buffs or heals. And then you have to decide if you're going to heal your allies or if you're going to damage the monster, so it goes on cooldown. So I think that's how a priest should be set up. I really do. Or heal classes, support classes in general. That way you're not having to manage 25 skills. You can cut it in half, literally in half, and get like 10 skills out of it or whatever. But that's always been a rant of mine. It's been stuff I've been thinking about, so I guess this whole thing has kind of led up to that. But I've been thinking a lot about Black Desert and gear, and I've been doing enhancing, trying to push for more AP, and I've been thinking about character builds. So this is just kind of some stuff that is floating around in my head. I figured I'd write down and just kind of make a little show on. The other thing that I want to talk about is wizards or mages. They should always, and maybe even some other casters in general, they should always have their kit balanced around a mana pool. And I don't mean the way BDO is balanced. You know, everybody's a one-shot mechanic in BDO. You all have major skills that can just basically one-shot most things. Most monsters, you know, higher end, maybe not, 2 or 3 shot, whatever. But there is no AoE mob grinding. Give me a sec. There is no AoE mob grinding. You know, it's just a one-shot thing. So you're gathering up a bunch of mobs and you're one-shotting them, or you're zooming through rotations, one-shotting stuff. You're not actually group farming, you know, like a lot of MMOs do. You'll gather up a huge group of them, you AoE them down. So it basically makes caster classes feel lackluster and useless. So there's no point in having a giant mana pool. There's no point in balancing the class around a mana pool. If I bring up, and this is a complaint I've had about Wizard for a while, but if I bring up my skills, and I'm Succession currently, let me scroll down to the utility skills here, or secondary skills. Of course, we have passives. I'm a big fan of self-buffs and passives. I like permanent upgrades to my character. But anyway, what I want to talk about is this right here, Magic Shield. Most wizards or mages should be balanced around their mana pool, and they should have a magic shield that they can activate that will absorb damage. This magic shield is absolutely useless in Black Desert. It has a cooldown of 1 minute. For 30 seconds you get plus 15% on resistances, which I'll talk about what resistances are. And then you get a consume MP equal to 25% of damage received for 30 seconds. So guess what? That means with my current mana pool at 1400, I can you know, 25%, so you want to multiply that by 4. I can get not quite 6,000 damage received, and it's going to convert 25% of that over to mana. So over the course of 30 seconds, I can receive 6,000 damage, and it's going to mitigate it by 25%. It's going to take that away. So, you know, it would still kill me. Both my mana would go to 0, and then my health would go to 0. It's absolutely useless. And whenever you get the 15% resistances, it's talking about, where's it at? This stuff here, knockdown, stun, stiffness, freezing, that type of stuff. Where is it? It's over here. These resistances: stun, stiffness, freezing resistance, grapple resistance, knockdown, bound resistance, knockdown, floating resistance. Those are the resistances it's talking about. Not damage reduction, not straight DP, resistances. Useless. Change that. It might help you if you were going to get stunned, but then those resistances are capped out anyway, so I think it's like 55% or something, if I remember right. Pain. The other game that I played, yes, I stacked mana. Yes, I had a huge mana pool. Yes, there was a mana shield that would mitigate damage and eat up mana. Yes, you would go to 0 if you used it incorrectly. Yes, there was a secondary buff to where you could get a certain amount of absorption before the mana shield kicked in, so it would mitigate a certain amount of damage. It was set up correctly. And yes, if you don't know how to use it, you will drain your mana and still die, but you have to learn, as a caster mage player, you have to learn when to activate it. And it was a toggle, so you could turn it on and off. And this you activate it, and for 30 seconds, if you get hit, you're going to lose all of your mana. It's just ridiculous. Protected area is another good thing. Shift Q, cool. They've give 50% damage reduction rate for 8 seconds. It has a 2-minute and 30-second cooldown. It's alright for a super skill, but 50% damage reduction rate is still not much when you're DP, when you're in a one-shot mechanic, basically. So you're not used to it would scale your DP up to 999, and you could actually tank things for a little bit, like 5-6 seconds before you had to run. But I don't know, things are not balanced. But I definitely think that healers should be at universal skill balance, so it's balanced around cooldowns, and I think mages and casters should be balanced around mana pool. As it stands in BDO currently, there isn't much. There's only a couple of ways to make your mana go up, and that's crystals and that's artifacts with lightstones. And if you do that, great, but then you're missing out on so many other great stats that it's not worth it. So you're to a point where it's just not worth it, and the mana shields just are pretty well useless. It's just a skill that never gets used. So my little wizard rant over. But all of that is how I think balance should be. Now, in terms of BDO, you've got basically 4 builds that you can do. You have an AP build, and that gets split into either going full AP or a hybrid, which is AP and accuracy. So you either have full AP or AP/accuracy, or the other 2 builds are DP. You either go DP/damage reduction, or you go evasion. So 4 builds. That's all you can do in BDO. You can try and do hybrid builds, but they become lackluster very quickly. There are no damage over time builds, which is sad. I hate to see that. I wish that they would incorporate that more. With the wizard, Fireball does do a burn. 15 burn damage every 3 seconds for 9 seconds. So basically you get 45 burn damage when you hit with Fireball. And I don't think that stacks. So, monsters aren't living long enough for that anyway. And Fireball Explosion will do 20 burn damage. So you're going to get 60. You're going to get 105 burn damage out of the 2, if they even stack. And you'll get 90, 105 burn damage out of the Prime Explosion. So 60 and 105. Whatever that is. 165. And what does Meteor do? 60 burn damage every 3 seconds for 18 seconds. So that's a little better. But the burn damage doesn't really matter because most of the time you're one-shotting stuff anyway. It's just sad. There's no poison damage that I know of in BDO. There's not really many bleeds. I know that some melee classes have bleeds, but it's just insignificant. So I wish they had that as an actual stat, so you could increase burns, you could increase bleeds, you could do poisons, and you could actually build the full damage over time, so you'd have seals on your armor that you could put into that, and you might not one-shot somebody, but you could stack so many burns and or bleeds or poisons on them that they just wilt away. Now, the full issues that I have with BDO combat and why I think it's not balanced, finally. And I'll switch over to my little doc here. So this is quick. You can pause and go over it. But my last section here. Melee characters are very fast, and they have a lot of mobile skills on low cooldowns. Casters are slow, but we also don't have high mobility skills. So my teleport is very slow. I don't have near the teleport skills that I need to be able to outrun or outmaneuver a very fast melee class with a bunch of mobile skills. So I just get ran over like being hit by a train. And the last thing is everything's a one-shot comp. You know, you have no bleeds or burn builds. I already went over that. No damage over time. CC is pretty much useless because if you're getting one shot, you're dead. You don't have to worry about being CC'd, so there's that. And I know that in some instances when there's tanks, people that are full DP, CC is good. But that's the other thing. You either have to stack tons of DP and live forever and just become immobile because people are just going to CC you, or you stack full AP and just try to one-shot everything before you go down. So it's a problem. It needs to be rebalanced. But that's my rant about BDO balancing and combat. And my opinion on how combat should be balanced around rock, paper, scissors style gameplay. Not necessarily needing a holy trinity, but it should be based around melee, range, and caster, and damaging skills. It should be a cooldown based war of attrition instead of one-shot comps. But, you know. And I understand why there's no damage over time builds in BDOs, because we don't have any strict healers to counter damage over time. You know, the only way that you can counter a damage over time build is with a dedicated healer or a cleanse. And we don't have either one of those really. So, but there's my rant, and I hope you enjoyed. I'll get this out and see what you guys think. Leave if you agree, disagree, whatever. Leave it in the comments. I'm curious to see. So, thank you so much for watching, and as always, until next time.